The value of modern attribution is not in perfect precision. The value of modern attribution is coordinated action under uncertainty.
So how this whole thing came about, an important thing happened in December of last year. The 2026 State of MarTech report came out. That's something that I've been the victim of reading for the last 4 years. I realized the report's been out there longer, but I kind of got hooked on this Netflix TV show about 4 years ago. And I started looking through this report, comparing it to all the other ones. And yes, I print them, but I save them. It's not the paper that goes in the trash can. I actually save them and I look back to see what happened. So I figured it would be a great place to kind of talk about it being January. Everybody wants the crystal ball, what the year holds, about the findings of this report. And this report, compared to all the other ones, had one big idea, and it was throughout the entire report. If you're not looking at AI and AI is not front and center in your life, you're pretty much screwed. Is that a fair interpretation of the report, Scott?
I'd have a more diplomatic way of putting it, but I suspect pretty much anyone in marketing right now already has gotten the message from above that, like, yeah, if you aren't doing AI, the door's over there.
The door's over there. And something else happened, between December and today. Benchmark, if you guys follow this, I think they're analyst research company, somewhere between. They put out a bunch of reports. Carrie Lou Dietrich is there. John Miller is part of their research group. They put out great stuff. So they had an event which they called Benchmarkapalooza. Mopsapalooza, Benchmarkapalooza, kind of.
Mike, they're taking your name.
in that realm. That's right, Mike.
Everybody's got a palooza. It's great.
I mean, it's a palooza everywhere. It's AI palooza for sure. But they put out this interesting stat where it was head of insights from Carta. Many of you know Carta because if you're in a smaller company, your probably equity is done through Carta. They manage equity. It's a SaaS company. They got a huge portfolio of companies of all different types. And they said, as of last year, the investors were super, super, super excited about any type of technology company that had AI or was AI native. And this slide right there, which I borrowed from that, not my slide, all credit goes to Carta, from the event, shows that if you're an AI native company, your valuation out of a sudden is $55 million on average. And I believe this was Series A, what they were showing here. And then, what you can raise is essentially 20 to 25% more being an AI native company than not AI native company. So all of this is like a logical precursor why probably we saw what we saw in the report. Frans, do you think like that's kind of a fair assumption? Totally my assumption. I could be wrong.
No, AI is everywhere, so there's no way around it. And we see it everywhere. It's showing up not as only AI native, but also showing up in a lot of SaaS tooling. I think Scott and I were joking and paraphrasing this phrase of you're not replaced by AI, but somebody using AI. And then we used that one and said, okay, basically SaaS is not going to be replaced by AI, but SaaS using AI is going to replace SaaS. So it's all about AI everywhere. And I think that's going to be the topic also of today, how to balance that, right?
For sure, for sure. And one thing that stays constant, I feel like, even with all of this enablement that we have, we're still, as marketers, under the microscope to deliver on the big number. And we're still struggling to bring it all together because the revenue numbers are over there. And all of the systems that we're managing, all of the things that we're doing still have to do with very thin, voluminous, murky marketing data, which is ultimately engagement data. I think silence is the confirmation of the kind of the disparate situation that we're in that we're all trying to solve for.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly one of these things where you have the dictate from on high of like, okay, you need to be doing AI. You need to be incorporating AI, AI. Feels like an old McDonald farm thing, you know. But at the same time, it really comes down to like you have these numbers and these metrics that you have to hit, the ones that you had to hit before, and the bar keeps raising on those. And so, yeah, it's not just about the label of AI; it's figuring out how we harness this to actually deliver better results.
Yeah, and
And when
maybe
I was
something to that. It just occurred to me. It's so funny. There was research done in 1984. Oh, I mean, how can that be relevant today? But the funny part is, there was this gentleman that I think he was a professor. He did research about computers, and he said, you know, productivity shows up everywhere except with the ones using the computer. So it's AI has not materialized yet. We're in that phase where we still have to figure out how do you produce value, create and drive value. And I think that's so it shows up, productivity shows up everywhere except in AI environments still today. And I think that's why this stat is so particularly interesting, because we are looking with the survey Scott and I do, where it does show some of the, you know, take up and uptake, sorry, for productivity and value.
And then when I told you that I keep those reports, I actually meant it, because that's how I know which report I need to go back to and what chart I need to grab. So I was looking at what you had in 24, and when you looked at different categories of software where the excitement was, right? Well, number one in 24 as a category was commerce and sales. Well, we all kind of know the salespeople are closer to the budget because they're the ones, you know, dragging the meat home. So might as well kind of get excited about the spend on sales tech. But then I look at the growth rates and what follows, in 24 versus 25. And in 25, yes, sales is still number one, kind of makes sense. But data is right up there. So we were talking about the marketing kind of conundrum of, you know, struggling with what to do with all this data. And yet data is number one as the category that's growing, even though not at the same pace.
Yeah, I mean, 24 was a bit of an anomaly just because that was sort of the year after the first full year of the Gen AI explosion. And, you know, where they like a thousand flowers bloomed, a whole bunch of, you know, like new like AI, startups. A lot happened in sales and commerce just because actually there hadn't been as much, you know, MarTech innovation there before. So yeah, it was a bit of an anomaly, but then I felt like coming back to 2025, you start to see things like, okay, it is still growing, it's starting to level out. And I think your point here around data, you know, there's different kinds of technologies that end up in the MarTech landscape, and not to pass judgment on any of them, but some of them are fairly easy. I mean, useful things, but they're relatively easy for what they do, and that's fine. There's a role for that. But there are other technologies in the MarTech stack that somebody isn't going to just sit down with ChatGPT and recreate, on their own. And I think when you actually look at a lot of data infrastructure and data management and data governance capabilities, it falls into the sort of thing like you don't create a million of those companies every week.
Yeah, the complexity is definitely there. Franz, I'm curious if the advertising spot for you signals anything, because here we had it in 24 as number three, advertising and promotions as the category. Everybody was excited. Then I remember seeing in one of your reports, I think it was the 24 report, how ABM being a huge, or ABM tech being a huge driver of advertisement suddenly had the largest fall in the numbers. And now we have advertising and promotions in 25, trailing behind everything else, including data and sales. Like, what happened there?
There's a report in between where we also explored generative AI use cases. So we took it from the other angle, not so much which tools are you using, but what are you using it for? And I think we had something like 51, 52 generative AI use cases, unique ones, no overlap, no gaps. And there again, advertising was really trailing. And one of the answers is that we put forward in the report was probably in your programmatic ad buying type of tooling and search and social advertising tooling, it's embedded, and you don't maybe even know it, or you don't have it in your own tooling. So that's one of the explanations that we came up with.
So we shouldn't stop the ad spend. It's still there. It's just we're doing it through a different lens.
100%. This is the tooling we're using, and the budget is a different stream. You're so right. Yeah.
All right, well, let's look at kind of, double click into the sales automation and enablement. To me, this was so interesting as this category has been growing. I mean, I understand kind of the human nature of it. Everybody wants the crystal ball. Buy me or get me a tool that does all these wonderful things for me. The things that I don't know, the things that I should do, the things that we should automate, because market is huge. You only have so many salespeople. So this interest in the go-to-market intelligence. What's your comment on that, Scott? You can take that one.
Well, again, I think yeah, I think generative AI was definitely an accelerant to this, but even just over these past few years, it really has been a wake up around the sales organization truly leveraging some of the technology that marketers have become more and more comfortable with here now for well over a decade. I mean, there's a reason why we start with MarTech, instead of sales tech, is because, again, no offense to sales orgs or salespeople, but they had a certain way in which they worked. They were very comfortable with that, and they kept doing it. And there was a little bit more, I think, resistance to like, oh, okay, what am I going to bring in this technology? How is this going to change the way I work? Up until the point that people actually got to see this stuff like, wait a second, I do this and it helps my close rate this way, and I do this and I'm saving my time on this, and once they saw the light, I think you saw this just incredible explosion of tools and data resources and things like that to be able to help the sales organization. I think for me, what makes it exciting, why Franz and I still keep this in the broader MarTech landscape, is because at the end of the day, it is deeply entangled with the marketing organization on getting those right data, getting this sort of in that larger picture of the end-to-end customer journey.
Franz, anything to add?
Yeah. This is by far the biggest category. So if you go to martechnet.com free sign up, you can see that this is by far the largest. And you can see also by the name, it's sales automation, enablement, and intelligence. They're almost three separate, overlapping, of course, disciplines. So automation is all that tedious stuff the salespeople don't want to do. Show me a salesperson who likes admin. I don't know them. So that is what GenAI was solving here. Making phone calls, note-taking, collaboration, that kind of stuff. Enablement is more on the content creation type of thing. Well, GenAI is big on content. So this is in the account-based marketing corner of making sure that your top 100 clients are served with the right personalized content. And then intelligence is more on lead mining, lead enrichment. So quantitative, qualitative type of stuff. Intent data, those kind of things. So yeah, it's not surprising that even the biggest area is even exploding on top, because it has such a wide variety of small tasks. And that's another thing. I think salespeople also like to enrich and improve their own work in small sets, not like a big tool and then roll it out and implement, but just, small incremental steps to get closer to the customer, find better leads, and convert them.
The other thing that kind of stands out to me here, like content marketing, like we all understand that. The content machine is the most ungrateful exercise that you can get yourself involved into. It's every day, and the shelf life, I kid you not, is like this short. So you got to produce. My kids wanted to be Mr. Beast. They're like, oh, I want to be a YouTube influencer. Look at Mr. Beast. He does all this stuff. It's amazing. And then CaliberMind's been running Hitchhiker's Guide, virtual event series. They would come into my office. They would look at all the screens with me editing video, for the on-demand part, clipping out the beginning and the ending. I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? This is boring. I'm like, this is what Mr. Beast does. But that's not him. That's his team that he pays. They don't want to be YouTube influencers anymore. And yet, here we go. The number 3 is events, meetings, and webinars. That's like all the virtual event world. And I'm curious. Now we all moved back to the office, with some kind of remote work still there, but we moved back to the office, but the webinars are still like at the top of the software, categories that are out there getting popular. Well, but what are your thoughts on that? Like, is that just the new consumption pattern for content, or poverty of time?
Well, I think in general, like video of all kinds has really come to be one of the strongest formats here for content. But I don't know. I mean, this might be a little too self-reflective on this, but I kind of feel like these kinds of webinars where it's more of a conversational discussion, like this is again, we're craving this, you know. Even even while a bunch of us are now back at the office, there's a bunch of us who aren't at the office all the time, or it's hybrid or whatnot, you know. And I think this sort of counter reaction to the isolation of previous years, people have just come to realize how much they genuinely appreciate, human interaction and human discussion. And so, yeah, I see a lot more of these webinar formats that are much more of like a group discussion than just like, oh, here's a slide that I will narrate to you. I think people like it.
Frans, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, this is a very nice area where you see what the impact of AI is on how brands have to position themselves. So in the old days, before AI, so to speak, let's make it let's exaggerate a little bit. It was easy just to send a message and say, we have the best product ever. People no longer buy that because right now you can go on ChatGPT, Claude, what have you, and find out other alternatives. So we're now forced into becoming expert thought leaders. And this is really a very good channel to show that, not only to interact, as Scott said nicely, but also to document, transcribe, and create content that is very good for your AGO. So I think that is a side effect and the idea behind this as well, to create content in a quick way, very deep content, knowledge, so that clients can relate to it. And that is something that, works with your AGO, SEO, whatever you want to call it.
I feel like definitely webinars are back. I'm doing a webinar with SQL, one of the webinar tools. Mary, if you're in the audience, if you don't mind sharing the link to the registrations, we're going to do it next week, talking about webinar series and like what role that plays in the content strategy and kind of the evolution of webinars from what they were when we first started, 2019, 2018. I mean, I just look back and I cringe at what it was. And the technology now is just so much better. So all right, let's move forward. Best of breed or one-stop shops. This was an interesting chart for me where you guys looked at all the different types of companies within the MarTech ecosystem. And you said people are generally happier with smaller service providers or software providers than going with bigger companies. And I feel like my entire existence as a marketer has always been like in the shadow of best of breed or one-stop shop. Do we buy everything from Adobe or Microsoft, or do we get a collection of small companies, but then we deal with integrations and all of the things that come with territory? What are your thoughts on that?
Frans, well, you were the one who did this analysis with that GT data. I thought was
Oh, you're behind this one.
What was your take on it?
Guilty. Yes. No, well, it's both. You need both. So basically what we learned, this was an eye-opener for us, because then we were looking at, and we're so blessed with having the possibility to combine the G2 review data from, the 5 stars. And it's not big differences, but still significant enough to say, okay, smaller ones, people are happier with. Now, instinctively, we think, oh, let's ditch all the big guys. No, please don't go that quickly and far. Because what we learned in later research also is that, a stack works like a solar system. So you have your sun, a system of record, then you have some planets around it, and then you have some moons orbiting around those. Now, these tools are really good for quick experimentation to find out if there's traction, if there's a certain use case, business case. Once you have that, you have your prototype. Your prototype is almost like a solidified learning curve. So these are all the lessons learned. Now, this is my functional design, and now I go to IT, or first marketing ops, and then they will translate that and then go to, okay, let's put this in our best of breed system. If we can mimic or use or reuse all of that, and then say goodbye to this other tool. So that is the dynamic that we see, and this enables quick learning. Quick and dirty. You don't have, because imagine if your best of breed, best of suite tool should help you with experimenting. I mean, that is trying to use your oil tanker as a speedboat. Good luck. That's not going to work. So those are, and you need an oil tanker. You need that too. And you need your speedboat just to, find new waters and see where you should be going and then turning back. and integrating. So that's what we learned, and that I think this you hit the nail on the head. This is one of the charts that sparked that idea.
Wow.
I actually
Okay, I
like
just
that.
want
So
to say, like,
Salesforce is
I
your
come up with
tanker.
a lot of like overextended metaphors, my friend. I kneel at the altar for you of that like metaphor of, okay, but you'll need the speedboat for this and the oil tanker for that. I love it.
It's really good. It's really good. Now I think of Salesforce as the tanker. And all,
Oh
all
boy.
of the additional capabilities that plug into Salesforce as the speedboats, and we definitely need both. And I feel like sometimes there's so much stuff out there, and this is the conversation of the tech stack shrinking or growing. You guys, I know you talk about it a lot, and I always pay attention. Oh, it changed. Now the dynamic is back to what it was. But I feel like this challenge of the marketing ecosystem, all the things that you have to do, because I mean, it's like marketing is the most diverse function within the business. All the things that fall under you. Sometimes I wake up and like, I'm just tired thinking about all of this. Like all the things that you have to be a pro or semi-pro at just to understand and connect. And sometimes these skill sets are very, very different from creative to very much data science and STEM and linear algebra and data science. Who would have thunk it? But yet it's there, right? And to me, the trend of the tech stacks shrinking again is maybe this desire to rein kind of and contain the chaos that's happening with the explosion of data, partially driven by AI. Is there anything else that you can think about that kind of drives this trend of us trying to decrease the number of tools?
I mean, this is, we see the same dynamic at a macro level with the MarTech landscape. I mean, the MarTech landscape keeps growing, and at a superficial level, people are like, I don't understand. Like, I keep hearing in the news every day about this company being acquired or whatnot. Like, doesn't this space consolidate? And the thing that you have to kind of wrap your head around is like, yes, it consolidates. It is consolidating all the time, like literally every year, like hundreds, if not thousands of companies are either acquired or, go out of business or pivot outside of the space. But the thing is, while there is that force of consolidation, that just like force of gravity that naturally happens, on the other side of this, there are just no barriers to entry. So anyone who has an idea, in fact, with generative AI, even more so than ever, can create a product and get it out into the space. Now, granted, like a lot of those products may not mature beyond, much of, initial idea, but the fact that you've just constantly got this flow of like new ideas and new possibilities, some of which do catch on and grow. And I think you see that same dynamic inside people's MarTech stack. Marketing ops teams work really hard to, I don't love the word consolidate because it has like a real judgment to it, but I would substitute the phrase rationalize. Like they're like, listen, I want to get rid of tools that we're not using. I want to avoid these duplications. I want to standardize and systematize. Marketing ops people are working hard every day to like make that happen. But at the same time, there do keep becoming these like new technologies and new products that come out that there's a responsibility to actually also be able to look at these and see like, hey, is this some new capability that we can add in that might give us a set of capabilities that we don't already have?
And then we ask, why are the ops people so jaded in general? It's because you've been dealing with the same nonsense in circles for years and years and years.
Yeah. If I look at the research we're doing on stacks, I think you might also see here that we are maturing as an industry. So what does that mean? If you're not so mature, you think a tool solves a problem, and it doesn't. This is, the whole Ferrari thing. We bought a Ferrari and we needed a Ford or whatever brand you want to call out. So that's what we see. And now it's changing into, okay, we are more mature. We can not consolidate, rationalize, and we know exactly what we need. And if you ask me what is mature, immature, immature is more like we externalize. We really believe things are solving stuff for us. Whereas you internalize, you go like, yeah, but this doesn't feel right. I don't see the results. You know what? We don't need this. And it's more like you have the guts to say no to stuff and reduce it. So I think that is something you see here as well in these figures.
Yeah. And now we get to the point. We've been dropping the hints of AI here, AI there. So here we are. Which marketing activities are you consciously using AI tools for? When I look at this, I mean, all of the typical offenders, the content production, the things that takes just so long when my kids come in and see the black screen of the video editing software, like, Mom, can't you do it faster, right? But then I look at the kind of this diffusion of AI technology chart on the right. And there is a huge gap between, in my mind, using these things as like point solution or ad hoc to do something faster, but it kind of starts and stops with an individual contributor, to the point where you can actually scale it. And this is so relevant for larger organizations, right? Across multiple teams, because then you run against the challenges of, adoption, understanding, and all of those other things, and then security and, connectivity and whatnot. And it's interesting to me that the majority of the AI use cases today, even though there's so many of them, but they're truly not scalable. Frans, to your point early on that we have not figured out a way how to actually meaningfully drive an increase in productivity and probably ROI on all of the AI initiatives.
Yeah, that's what you see here is that we're struggling with. And instinctively, when we have a new innovative technology, we optimize what we do already, which is 9 out of 10 times improving efficiency, which is something else than effectiveness. So efficiency in my mind is saving money, doing more for less and that kind of stuff. And effectiveness is more like making more money. And of course, by being more efficient, you can make more money, but that's not what I mean. With effectiveness, it's really net new capabilities. And it's something we'll see later in our conversation that, net new capabilities, net new use cases, revenue streams. Maybe long story short, we ain't seen nothing yet.
I think the four most hated words, in marketing ops and probably pretty much any function at this point in time is the 4 words of do more with less. Okay, yeah, we got that point. But, from your perspective, Frans, I think that's fine to a certain extent from just purely an efficiency play. But what we really want to do is, can we do more with just more?
Yeah, I can think of the other 3 words: better, cheaper, faster, pick any 2. It just never works with all 3.
No. Yeah.
All right, let's look at the use case for unstructured data and text applications. And I feel like, to me, the answer of why AI flourishes in this area, unstructured text, lots of language-related stuff, it's in the name of large language models. They were created to parse through large volumes of language, right? So of course they do great summarizing things. Of course they do great, which is not the only area of, marketing ops and marketing analytics, but this is where they shine. And it looks like this is exactly what your report found out, that anything that has to do with unstructured data, whether it's voice, whether it's emails, whether it's text, that's where the use cases shine.
Yeah, I think the most surprising thing about this is how few companies are actually taking advantage of this. Because even these numbers, none of them, cross over the 50% mark. And these are for people who participate in our surveys tend to be in this, I'll say the upper quartile of marketing ops and marketing tech people, So basically the top quartile folks, even them, it's 20%, 30%, this is still very early. But you're exactly right, Nadia. I mean, the power that is unlocked by being able to tap into this incredible amount of unstructured data and behavioral data, that before just wasn't accessible for marketing to use in any sort of programmatic or structured way. It's amazing. And these LLMs are really good at that. The only thing that, I think is surprising is more companies haven't realized how much power they're sitting on. But I expect we are going to see rapid adoption in this direction over the next 12 to 18 months.
Probably because we live in dog years.
Oh, well, dog years were the original internet time, right? That was moving at 7x.
So what is it now?
Now at AI speed, it's some exponent on top of that. It's fruit fly years or something like that.
Yeah, that's scary to think. So Frans, now my question is to you. You had recently a LinkedIn post which caught my attention, and it's hard to catch my attention these days with all of this nonsense just in my feed. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting one. So there was a conversation which I specifically remember 6, 7 months ago where people were speculating that AI and AI agents are here to replace SaaS. SaaS is dead. I could have put a picture with some zombie looking guy with SaaS is dead. There's like so many of those pictures out there on the internet. And it turns out that it's not AI that's replacing SaaS, but rather SaaS getting AI functionalities, which are very much appreciated, especially by large enterprises, because they still like the business rules. That's how large companies operate. How can you have a large organization that runs on no rules, but rather, the probabilistic output of whatever? So it's interesting to me where you said enhancing existing functionality use cases are so much ahead of any other kind of AI use case that's out there. Could you comment on this?
Yeah, sure. I remember all those posts. I collected those, and there were a lot of tombstones in there as well, like RIP, RIP, SaaS. Interesting. So if you're in AI or tombstones, you're golden. But what you see here is really the net new. This blew our mind. We wanted to know. So is it really replacing SaaS? And yeah, sure. A small part down below, you see it's replacing SaaS. And those are probably the areas where the deterministic type of approach, if then else, rule-based SaaS, try to mimic more probabilistic stuff. So it wasn't good at that anyway, but we tried it because, and this is, I think, also where we enter the holy grail of all the MarTech. We see this not just topping every RFP, but also the most prevalent requirement in any MarTech, which is personalization. So you can't do this just with if-then-else rules. It's pretty hard. So we did the best we can. Now we can enrich it, replace it with probabilistic, language-based AI, and that opens up a whole new spectrum. And here you really see that people go like, okay, we are trying now net new use cases. Maybe not in production yet, but we're trying it out.
And I bet you the reason why the SMB, like when we look at the chart on the right, implementing entirely new functionality and use cases, the SMB segment is like 2x ahead of enterprise. And it's probably because you move faster, you have smaller teams, you have to do less collaboration. You can just, do things first and ask for permission later or apologize for something not working later. Like enterprises just work differently. It's probably that. I think of all the talking heads on LinkedIn in SMB community saying that they fired their entire team and now they just got them and 2 AI agents or 5 AI agents or 30 AI agents doing all the things. I'm thinking, yeah, that doesn't quite scale, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always feel like the small businesses, they're willing to take these risks, not from even like a reckless perspective. Simply like, hey, they are intentionally looking to disrupt the large enterprises, the incumbents in their space, and so they're always looking a little bit for that edge. I think these numbers show exactly sort of your assumptions of small business strategy.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Sorry, on the previous one with the enterprise, what I think they do is replacing a lot of the stuff they couldn't really scale with deterministic solutions. So now they're just cleaning up that backlog, and it's a right move, I think. So they know what they're doing. They know what it can create traction or does already. Now let's replace it and then take it from there. I love their approach.
So now we go into the area of marketing analytics. We kind of started there, marketing or marketers under the microscope. You got all this data that you're trying to do something with. Maybe you don't have the skill set because that's not the path that you started on within the marketing world. Maybe it's just too much and you got a day job and that's like the necessary evil that you have to report on to justify what you do. And it's interesting to me that, when you look at what internal data sources are you integrating your AI agents or agentic workflows into, like it's, CDPs and CRMs are up there at 61%, which is like, wow, I mean, that's a high number. But then you also kind of hear the notion that companies are not rushing to plug AI into everything because of all of the concerns. Like we've all been jaded, and I feel like the trust in AI is winning away this year because so many people got numbers that were wrong, suggestions that were just egregiously, out of this world. And it's the contextual interpretation, it's the black box lamenting that I just don't know how this number came up. So if somebody asks me, I cannot explain. And this lack of data lineage and auditability, like if somebody asks me, how'd you get that number? I just don't know. And yet we see kind of, people plugging into CRMs at the top. It's, to me, it's a little bit of a, there's wild cases out there.
Well, I mean, we know we need to get data into these AIs to actually do things that are useful and differentiated. I mean, the funny thing is, for all the amazing power that these AI engines have, they are, for all practical purposes at this point in time, commodities. I mean, you can get it, any one of your competitors can get it. The entire way in which you actually turn that AI capability into some sort of competitive advantage is entirely about the data and process that's unique to you that you feed into it. Not new for marketing, by the way. We've had this data challenge for, I think, as long as there's been MarTech. There's been the challenge of how do we get more data and get the data clean and good. But yeah, this is very much what we see. And what data do we first feed into AI? Well, the data that is probably the easiest for us to get access to. And so that's why, CRMs and CDPs, they've been sort of in that role of sharing data throughout the MarTech stack. Great, let's go ahead and plug them in. I was very excited to see, and Frans, you should chat a bit about this, the brand and marketing assets, because I think one of the things that's pretty exciting here is we recognize with these AI engines that it's not just about customer data, but it's how we do the synthesis between customer data and content as data. But then you go further down the road, and yeah, a lot of folks just don't have easy access to being able to integrate in internal docs, our call transcripts, our product catalog. And I think that's just going to be some of the hard data plumbing work that, for all the sexiness of still AI, we have to put on our plumber's hat and get a wrench and put more of these things connected.
Good news, guys. Everybody on this call will have the job tomorrow. The plumbing is still a thing.
Yeah, maybe plumbing. I think we'll move to from being operators of an automation flow to more of moderators, so that we have to figure out, the boundaries and the guardrails of AI. And to the point of Scott, what surprised me was the number 2 here. So yeah. I know in data we have done a lot of plumbing, a lot of integrations, and there's a lot of APIs in there. Ecosystems, connectors, integrations, but in assets, that's a real pain. How can you create an asset, translate it into something personalized, feed it back into the system, optimize? I mean, that whole layer chain is broken, and I think with Gen AI that becomes maybe the API of content. So we can start, closing the loop and making sure it's personalized on the fly, maybe even contextual or not. So yeah, I'm very excited and see that it's very high. I think it's probably relatively primitive so far. Image here, image there, visual there, video there. But maybe I think we can integrate this in the future more and more.
So here's what keeps me up at night. I'll make this comment short and sweet, and then we'll move on. The beautify button on Google Slides, where your sales team can start building the deck and hit beautify, and voila, amazing things happen. If that thing proliferates, you can start sailing off into the sunset away from your brand. So just be careful with that button. I've seen scary things that keep me up at night, and I'll keep it at that when it comes to content.
Beautify, unbrandify might be a better label for it. Would you like to unbrandify your slides? Yes, please. Sorry.
Actually, I would love for Google to do that. You gotta keep the risky actors away from pushing the button.
I mean, this is so telling. If you use Google Sheets, it's prompting you constantly. Shall I summarize this table? And I go, no, just let me do my job. I never needed that. Yeah, but I want to summarize it, please. And then go okay, listen, this is Google. This is big tech. If this is the best they can offer, they offer a lot more. Don't get me wrong; they have a lot of other great tools. But inside Google, docs or slide, just leave it out, please. It's distracting. It's taking real estate, in where you can click. But okay, that's
Mom,
mild
Dad, do you want to play?
frustration
Do you
here.
want to play now? Do you want to play with me? I'm here to play.
No, I
All
hate
right.
playing. Oh no.
Let's look at the next stat, which I thought was interesting. So, connecting all of your custom integrations to AI, and the fact that only half, again, looking at the glass that's half full, not half empty, a little bit of a pessimistic approach here. Only half of the companies have these custom built integrations. And I remember when I was in the IT automation orchestration space, when everybody was moving from mainframe to cloud, and it was like this massive exercise from servers to the cloud, there was this notion of tribal knowledge that was disappearing when people would leave companies because, in mainframes, it's all COBOL and not everybody can write stuff in COBOL and understand it. And over the years, all the custom integrations were, cobbled together in ways that now nobody can figure out. So people choose not to touch them. And it creates this barrier to kind of, advancing the technology because you don't want to risk, especially if you're a large company, the stakes are higher. You don't want to risk all these custom integrations even from the get-go. I mean, I understand why it's not everyone, because you will create inevitably technical debt, which you may or may not solve for in the future. So like my take on this, when I looked at, things that people are doing there with custom stuff, creating their own little, web of what's possible. Like, yeah, they're probably thinking forward. I mean, that shouldn't prevent you from, progress and whatnot, but I could definitely see that as a concern, especially as your company size grows.
I mean,
I think this is your area, integrations, right?
I feel like Don Quixote on that one. I mean, I think the thing that was most interesting to me is that, we've been at this integration challenge for, frankly, as long as I've been involved with anything in MarTech. And while there's definitely been progress, I mean, if you look at like the explosion of, these iPaaS tools, if you look at the fact that, many of these major MarTech platforms have all worked very hard to build very large ecosystems with tech partners. Almost anyone who builds a MarTech product now, you can go to their website, somewhere in their website, there'll be an option like, oh, I want to see your integrations. So it's like there's been all this progress of, the industry really recognizing, the integration is a first-class component of what makes this work. Yet when it comes down to, actually in the field and what marketers need, what marketing operations team need to actually make this stuff work, it's not happening. It's certainly not happening out of the box. And the fact that, you've got like 56% overall who are having to do custom build integrations. But to me, the real number was here at, at the SMB to enterprise breakout. 72% of enterprises are like, yep, we're building custom integrations. And to your point, Nadia, those are not particularly stable things. It's the maintenance side of that on the other end, the entropy associated with it, that's going to bite you in the butt. So I don't know. I see this stuff and I do have to admit I cry a little bit. I'm like, we've come so far, but we have so far to go.
And I think the nuances of the enterprise go-to-market probably force larger companies to go the custom route, because if everybody's I mean, this is like totally from my, marketing messaging playbook, if you wish. Like if everybody was the same and everybody went to market the same way and everybody had the same build on the tech stack side, like you would not have your competitive advantage. And the downside of your competitive advantage, of your uniqueness, is that things have to be custom built for you because you got your unique setup. That was kind of my take on that. I don't know, Frans, if you have any comments.
Well, sometimes, harsh to say maybe, but there's a lot of IT in enterprise. They got to do something.
Shovel-ready jobs.
Well, it sometimes it's the natural go-to attitude, that like a go-to place action. Like, let's integrate. Why? And I'm so impressed by the work Scott did for years within the second layer, the pre-build. That is equally safe. Governance, everything is so we're not bypassing stuff. No, it's really in the pre-build. So for the life of it, I don't understand every now and then. So if you look at it, everything moved to the cloud. Why? So we could make sure IT is not totally occupied every single half year with a new release upgrade type of thing. And yet now we have them, and maybe they're now, I don't know, looking for work inside the integrations. I'm not trying to sound negative or condescending in any way, shape, or form, but yeah, the pre-built stuff is really good. Click, use it, and hit the ground running. And I think this is particularly where marketing ops people can excel and have an advantage internally in any company.
And in a lot of cases, I feel like this, you guys did such a good job bringing these two concepts together. And maybe in the interest of time, I will do a little bit of a hopping here on the slides. You brought up an interesting concept where you talked about this rule-based versus kind of probabilistic nature of AI, and I will go in here. Talk to me about the divide within kind of the approach to the AI output, and that very much separates enterprises in a lot of cases that are very rules bound and how they want to approach things from companies that do have liberties to explore what it could be kind of outside of the guardrails because they're smaller, they're more nimble, they're more curious, maybe they're more audacious. Scott, maybe I'll toss this over to you. The whole concept of deterministic versus probabilistic.
Yeah, well, I think this is actually a difficult thing for almost all of us to wrap our heads around, is everything we've known about computing, in business for the history of computing has always been deterministic. That was one that, in fact, actually, that's what we used to joke about. Like, yeah, you tell the computer just do X, and it's just literally going to do X. But in many ways, right, we became very comfortable with that. Marketing operations, yeah, we had all these like elaborate workflows and automation set up, but we always knew, hey, for this deterministic automation, if I feed it the same input 100 times, I'm going to get the exact same output 100 times. That's very comforting. Challenging, Frans mentioned this earlier, there are definitely use cases like with personalization where trying to do personalization through purely deterministic logic, very, very difficult to simulate. But now we come along with, these LLMs that are truly probabilistic in nature. And oh my goodness, the power that opens up to be able to do probabilistic type computing, which particularly with language, whether it's the interpretation of language or the generation of language, not just language, but multimodal media and all that sort of stuff, it's amazing. But trying to incorporate this into these like structured workflows that we've had, these automations where, hey, listen, we want to be very clear on the expectations that when, we get X trigger, we're going to get Y action on the other result. It's actually really challenging for us to think about like, okay, well, where do we incorporate this probabilistic piece into that? And I think maybe it's the next slide, is one of the things Frans and I did in, our last report here was just make it clear, like, this is not necessarily an either or proposition. It's not like all deterministic or all completely agents have complete autonomy, go off, run marketing for me. That there are basically steps along the continuum and there are trade-offs you get between these two. So you really look for the opportunities of where can we apply that probabilistic computing in a way that's very powerful, like say interpreting, incoming emails or, call recordings or things like that. And where do we keep things in a more deterministic workflow? Because we need to know, hey, when somebody files a ticket, I want to make absolutely sure that ticket gets routed to the customer service team and that they handle it within the appropriate prioritization in the queue. I don't want us to guess about that. I want us to make sure we do that 100 out of 100 times.
Frans, anything to add?
Yeah, something like beautify this ticket to support. No, sorry.
We don't want to beautify. There's no telling what's going to come out of that.
No, but yeah, sugarcoat this ticket maybe. No, but it's totally to the point. It's use case based, and we have to learn to think in use cases. So it's basically atomizing the way we think. It's not one tool solving everything, but use case based. And where there's interpretation, you probably need something probabilistic. Whereas if you need a lead in a certain bucket, then please don't make it a Las Vegas probabilistic game.
So the part that we skipped here, and which is relevant to what you just said, in the interest of time, you were talking about value engineering, which is, you deciding how do you want to create the process that essentially enables others within your company to benefit from whatever you're building, very much within the realm of marketing operations. You're no longer the infrastructure kind of, plumbing connectors. You're kind of the ideators and the strategy people helping everybody else within the business to understand the value that they can drive from things. I think Mary put a link to into the chat for the Hitchhiker's Guide episode on which you presented that framework. So if you guys are interested, again, today we skipped that, but we can you can see there. The one, actually, this is the framework there where you talked about the 3 tiers of marketing operations. What I wanted to go to, knowing that we have about 6 minutes left, I want to do on-air live experiment, and I want to share a conceptual thing with you, which actually has been productized, and I want to hear your take on it. So if we're talking about this probabilistic versus deterministic AI. So you know how we talked about AI, large language models, being phenomenal with language. You do translation through them, they can do an amazing job. You do coding through them. I mean, Claude, they say they write over 90% of their own code. Brain explosion. They have these large databases everywhere on the internet that you can, go and train them, and there's plenty of data, and all of that is rule-based. They understand the structure. They just thrive in this land of tons of training data available. And then when it comes to all the numbers, that's more difficult because they're not large math models, they're large language models. And I feel like that's exactly what we see here in the top AI agent use cases, right? So, they're not good with treating numbers as integers. They're good with treating numbers as, text or strings. They look at patterns. And CaliberMind this is my shameless plug, but I promise you this is totally relevant, not to be completely disrespectful. So CaliberMind kind of started experimenting in this area where we said, we have AI capabilities and we will help people to summarize reporting data where they can look at the numbers on a report or on a dashboard, and it will help them tell the story of what do all of these numbers mean together, right? Like sometimes people can tell it's up or down, but they struggle to tell the story, all of these QBR related things. And then we kind of went beyond that and we said, what if we take the power of large language models and we actually apply it in the area where it performs best, where we take probabilistic nature of LLMs and turn it into deterministic output, because we're not going to have AI interpret numbers from a large pool of numbers that's out there, say from your Snowflake or whatnot, but rather we'll have AI and we'll train AI grounded in your rules, rooted in your data with all of your business logic and access and whatnot, but we will have it write query instead. Does it do well with language? It's phenomenal with language. Can it write SQL? Can it write anything else? Yes, it can. So if it returns the query back, and then, of course, you don't see any of that. If you want to audit, it's there. But you can have, very high level of accuracy in what comes back, very low level of hallucination. So it's like flipping the script and applying, the superpower rules to what large language models can do when they're built into the software. So I'm curious on your take, because Agent Cal or Agentic Analytics for us, it's launching on Thursday. It's already out there on our website. But I'm curious on your take, like this kind of non-conventional approach to unleash the superpower of AI within the world of math that AI doesn't do well.
I think it's improving in over time, and it will improve. But yeah, it wasn't built for that initially. It's more the large language model following the language. Interestingly enough, it was more for unstructured data, not the structured data. But what it can help, and this is also what we saw in our research with the sales intelligence, remember that slide, where we are looking into, interpreting data. And that was one of the key ideas of Gen AI in the first place, to develop it.
I think you've got a really beautiful blend here, because for all the wonderful things that generative AI gives us, turns out there's like a whole bunch of AI before Gen AI that is still actually incredibly reliable. The entire field of machine learning, all these things we've been able to do for improved analytical capabilities over the years, and I think where things get exciting is when you recognize, okay, the language portion, of these LLMs, it has a certain place, in sort of this thing that's running on a loop right here. You see it, right? Like, oh, well, listen, instead of the user having to figure out how to like word the query and do I know SQL and when, like they can just ask, in natural language, the LLM, can interpret that as to like, oh, these are the things they're actually interested in. But then the LLM is not the thing that's actually going off and doing the calculation on the numbers because it kind of sucks at that, but it's essentially, it's almost, this is a variation of like context engineering, right? It's basically saying, okay, well, the LLM then knows, where to point, for like what sort of services, what sort of tools, what sort of data is being used. And the LLM is not trying to fake that. But then when the results come back, it can also present them back to the user as part of that conversational interaction. I love stuff like this. I think, again, this isn't unique to MarTech. I mean, this is just across tech. We get um, infatuated with a particular tool at the moment, and hey, it's a hammer, and I can use this hammer on everything. I can replace a light bulb with a hammer, But like as we start to get over that initial like, wow, a hammer, that's where you really start to get the sense of like, okay, we use the hammer for this, we use the screwdriver for this, we're going to need a wrench for this other thing. And it feels like that's where we're starting to get now with Gen AI, incorporating it more into the toolbox instead of just like the one tool to rule them all.
It's super exciting. And sometimes I feel like I want to go work in a different industry, but then I'm thinking I'm going to be bored on day 2.
This is the exciting part. Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing on what Scott just said. Sorry. There's, from data we make information, from information we make insights. I think machine learning is really good at the first part and generative AI in the second part, from information to insights. But that's my last 5 cents. Mike.
Thank you for connecting the dots. This is a perfect wrap. Frans, you're the best.